Assalamu alaikum. I'm Joshua Salam, and you're still watching Deen Talk. That's right. The name of the show hasn't changed yet, so we're going to stay right there. Now, we left the show like just kind of opening up some serious issues. And before we continue, I want to kind of talk about a few stories. I told you I was going to give you a few stories. Let me just give you one to start out with. So I was a young Muslim youth of North America. It was a whole organization. And they wanted to keep the brothers and the sisters separate. You know, they didn't want them being, you know what happens when so you want to keep them separate. So they said, okay, you're at a camp, and we're gonna send the boys to the mall, and we're gonna send the girls to the ice skating rink, right? So I said, okay. So the boys go to the mall with everybody else at the mall. It's like all the women and men and children who go to the mall were there. But those Muslim girls weren't there. They were at the ice skating rink with all those other guys and girls and things at the ice skating rink. And there was such a desire to keep the Muslim youth separated that, and it still happens to this day, in my opinion, that we've never really fostered how do we get them to know each other so that, well, I fully support Beyond Chai, and I want you to talk about it more. But you asked the question, like, why are we having it? And I think that might be a piece to it. So I wanted to know what you guys thought about kind of how that fits into this dynamic that we're dealing with. Amen.
I think from the therapist's point of view, it's good that we do have parents that discuss religion and have close relationships with their children, but parents are so focused on the here and now, grades, no relationships, period, focus on career, but then they forget to teach that part of how will you get married. So I think it's really important to have that educational piece too. I know a lot of parents who talk to their 7-year-old sons about, okay, so when you get married, how's it going to happen?
Huh?
And the kid's like, oh, okay. But you have to introduce that topic early on. I mean, we introduce studying habits, we introduce everything else, but we don't ever teach our children how to look for a mate.
Well, wouldn't you have to teach the teacher? Like, how do you teach that?
Yeah, I think that's very important. I think the teacher in this case is parents, right? So I think a lot of times the parents are in denial, you know, and then we almost have to elevate the conversation. What I mean by that is, you know, a lot of times parents, you know, are so narrow focused. They want to stay, for example, if you come from an Indian family background, we want to marry someone that's Indian, right? So, I mean, that puts a lot of pressure on the kids, right? So, I mean, when you're talking about, you know, just narrowing down to, you know, subpopulation that you have access to, right? So you want to be able to elevate the conversation and say, listen, you know, we are in America. This is a melting pot. You know, if you want to stay Muslim, then let's look at the broader population. Let's look at the Muslim community and see where the compatibility fits. Because, you know, you come from a different family background. I come from a different family background. We go to the same school. We have similar values, similar understanding, similar culture. But at the same time, what's common is a faith. So I think the parents need to understand that and allow the flexibility, you know, to be able to let the kids explore.
That's probably easier said than done to allow that flexibility.
That is true.
Now,
sorry, go
ahead.
ahead.
Go ahead. Zakaria, when you were getting married, you know, what were some things that you were thinking about? And this discussion that we're having now, was that involved in your thought process of how am I going to raise my children and this and that for you to finally make your decision?
Well, yes. So those factors, I think, and I have some comments just to follow up on what Asad just said. But to answer your question, yeah, I mean, of course, right? I mean, so it all depends on how you approach marriage. And for me, those were some primary considerations, right? It's not just the, you know, 2 or 3 months in, right? But it's, you know, 2 or 3 years in, right? Or 5 or 10 years in, right? So how do I want the household to look like? How do we want the household to look like, right? So it's a collaborative effort, right? So those certainly play a huge role, and I think to an earlier point that we were discussing, I think having that foundation in the religion, I think really facilitates a lot of these sorts of conversations, right?
Because that's what you were saying towards the beginning of the show too. Yeah.
Absolutely, because you're starting off from at least for us, right? You're starting off from a very common denominator, right? You're starting off from a baseline that we all agree is a baseline, right? And then you're growing from there. To Asad's point about sorry, you're mentioning. I forgot my thought over here. was about the.
Elevating the conversation to.
Yeah, I mean, and to Josh's comment on training a trainer, I think it's incredibly important to understand, what Islam is, right? Because
which is a whole
Topic
books
in
and books and
itself.
books.
It is.
Islam is different to me than it is to everybody on this.
Absolutely, but I think if you look at the diversity aspect of Islam, right, and just the diversity that our Creator expresses through His many creations, right? I mean, you have different trees, you have different flowers, right? You have different animal species, right? And we have different human beings, right? In different ethnicities and cultural backgrounds. So diversity is something that is endemic to the way that our Creator has expressed Himself, right, through His creation. And I think first to really understand that and what does that mean and how do we incorporate it, I think it's incredibly important to first to talk about that more, to talk about diversity more, how that is part of how that was practiced, from the very earliest of times, right? Being able to appreciate that and not to shun the unknown, but to embrace the unknown, right? And to learn about the unknown.
Now, I have a major point to bring up. But before I do you guys have any pressing responses to anything that you heard over here before I bring this up?
I think the important part is you're saying about thinking and considering and weighing. And again, sort of Muslims kind of being an immigrant generation the first generation just like worries about survival, how to do that. The second generation kind of worries out about a little bit more. So I think a lot of times when people think about marriages, they just think about, compatibility, but they don't go into the day-to-day. So I think that is also a very big key issue where people don't think, how do I want my life to look like?
How come you never make the bed? You never make the bed.
Little things like
Little
that.
things,
Or if
yeah.
you're marrying an Indian person, you kind of automatically think that because you're of the same cultural background, that things would flow a little bit more easier. And it's not, because everybody has their own familial culture and personal culture they bring into a relationship.
What about you, Arifi? Did you want to add anything?
I think y'all hit it really well, but
So you ready for me to open up this can?
open it up.
Now, we said that DeenTV did a unscientific survey, so we'll get to that next segment. I'm going to pull out some papers. I have some papers in front of me, reading some stuff. But I did an even more unscientific survey. It's just how I feel. I feel we have a huge problem in America with women, Muslim women, trying to get married, right? Because they always say, well, the men, they go marry, Jewish, Christian, or whatever, or they go, all the way back home and bring. But the women are becoming more and more extremely educated, making a lot of money. Sometimes that intimidates men. They're not necessarily trying to go all the way back home and grab somebody and bring them back. And they don't see option as marrying a Christian or a Jewish person. And so you're starting to see that. In many messages, a lot of Muslim women are coming saying, hey, I'm whatever age, I've been trying to get married for a while. I don't see any compatibility with the available Muslim men. This person over here is a good guy, good character and things like that. So I just want to make sure that as we're talking about this subject, that we're not just talking about it from one side and not realizing that that is going on. That's something that a lot of imams are dealing with. And a guy from Beyond Chai can tell, beyondchai.com, can tell us so much more about that. But I just kind of wanted to open up that can.
Can I throw something out there?
Please do.
All right, so I'm working on my dissertation right now, and for my doctorate,
Okay.
and in hearing and speech sciences, if anyone cares.
We care.
Oh, I feel so special. But before I began my doctorate, I actually had more than one person sit me down and be like, okay, Arifi, you've got a master's degree. You already have taught at a university. You go any higher than this, you are never going to get married. No one's going to want to marry.
You were told that?
By multiple people.
We won't mention any names, but wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
multiple people told me that I would never get married because I was no man would want someone who was more educated than them or who made more money than them. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm just single forever. That's fine.
Because I'm getting this dissertation. Yeah,
I'm getting this degree. And, it comes down to you deciding, well, I don't want a man who doesn't want me to be the best that I can be. I want a partner who wants me to be the absolute best version of myself.
Can you say that again? I think that's powerful for so many Muslim women and women of any faith to hear that. Again, say that one more time.
Sure. I don't want any man who doesn't want to support me and want me to be the best version of
best that you
myself
can
that
be.
I can be.
Right. That's
Yeah.
good. Yeah.
Yeah. And I found one. I did. So it worked out. But yeah,
All
it
right.
took some time.
But you found it. You found it. Now, Mr. Asad, BeyondChai.com. Tell us, from your perspective and creating this organization, how much of this, are you still dealing with, and do you think really dictates how you had to have BeyondChai.com? Because business is really finding a need and filling it,
Yeah.
and that's what you did.
Yeah, no, we have a lot of cases, where, we have women who are educated, and you have men that are not willing to marry someone who has a higher education. But I think to complicate things further,
Oh man, why you gotta go and do that?
so,
To complicate things further.
so you have, as you stated, it's a fact that, a lot of men are not as educated as women, right? But at the same time, when women are educated, they're not willing to marry anyone below their level, right? So it's not a one-way street; it's a two-way street, right? So they think, whether it's true or not. I will let Sister Tabassum, make some remarks there, but they think because they have a PhD, they also have to marry someone who has a PhD because the compatibility is there. They're able to have conversations intellectually. And that may or may not be the case. And again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a counselor, so that's not my purview to be able to answer, but I have my own perspective and opinions. But I would love to hear what Sister Tabassum has to say on this.
And I bet they would too, but they're gonna have to wait because we're gonna take a break and come back to Deen Talk. We're opening up, and in the next segment we're gonna talk about that survey that even DeenTV did. So I don't want anybody to go anywhere. Tabassum, Arifi, Zakaria, I say you gotta hold your comments. Everybody, don't go anywhere. We're gonna keep talking about this when we come back.